Okay, so the PlayStation Showcase just wrapped up. It ran a little over an hour, and there were something like 35 or 36 different games that were showcased here in some capacity, and they even talked about hardware. Now, all of this I'm going to go over more in depth for Newswave tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, so make sure you stop by for that. But I really wanted to go over my overall thoughts on the presentation itself and talk about a couple of standout games here. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel. And let me know down in the comments what you thought about the presentation in general, because, you know, I'll be upfront, it didn't exactly hit like I thought it would after being so long since the last presentation. That's not to say it was a bad presentation, but it wasn't that incredible, overwhelming sense of just there was announcements everywhere and these games that were just internet breakers. We had a couple, but like it wasn't necessarily the buildup that was happening. The expectations were high. I don't think this presentation necessarily got there, but again, a lot of games were shown here. And starting right away with Haven and even Firewalk, we got at least an idea, kind of, as to what they're working on. Haven, it's called Fair Games, and this is sort of an issue we ran into with this presentation. There's a lot of CG and a lot of title cards, and not as much gameplay for some of them. They're just giving us an idea as to what we're looking at. For example, Fair Games, to my understanding, it looks kind of like a heist team shooter style game, and my only concern with that, it is a live service game. Remember, Sony bought Haven, I assume, after seeing either this game or kind of their workflow that went into it, as they did discuss kind of their cloud setup that they have specifically for remote work, almost just development. This game in particular, again, we haven't necessarily seen it in gameplay, but Fair Games looked a little concerning in that it could get kind of lost in the shuffle. I don't want to say it was necessarily generic looking, but we'll see. PS5 and PC, though, which does show, and they do this a few times here, that they are going PC and PlayStation 5 day one with their first-party games if they are live service titles. It's very important, obviously, monthly active users overall, so they got to do what they can to keep these games running with as many people that they can reach. Helldivers 2 was also announced. I think this is a good thing because Helldivers 1, it's been a while. What was that, 2015 or 2016? I didn't necessarily get really into the first Helldivers, but I did like to see this for people who are fans of that game to finally get this announcement. It's been teased in, it was teased in that NVIDIA leak list that got out there. So this PS5 and PC for 2023. So that game is at least coming this year. Another game that actually surprised me a bit is Phantom Blade Zero. I think this game looks really cool, and yes, it still plays into kind of the samurai kind of setup, but I'm not really getting tired of any of that. I really enjoy seeing some of these games and what unique concepts they come up with. The biggest thing here that caught my eye was when you're fighting multiple enemies at once. It looked incredibly smooth. Like everything, the choreography for all of that with your character fighting and blocking against multiple sword throws and stuff, I think looked pretty good. So I'm going to keep an eye on Phantom Blade Zero. It is cool to see a nice surprise like that pop up in one of these showcases. And speaking of surprises, well, I guess it would have been a surprise, but it was one of the worst kept secrets out there, and that's Metal Gear Solid 3 is in fact getting that remake. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, playing into what I figured they would do, which is drop the 3. Again, the idea of having a 3 in there, while, I mean, that's technically what the game is called, the original one, it doesn't really play into the idea of people buying it first. They might feel the need to go back and get the Metal Gear Solid 1 and then 2 and all of that. But in this case, the remake trailer was just CG. I mean, it showed Snake, which is cool, in the jungle, as you'd expect for Metal Gear Solid 3, but that was kind of it. To my understanding, this game is slated for 2024, but that can, of course, shift, considering they didn't really say much else here. They did mention that there is a Metal Gear Solid collection coming later this year, so that's exciting. 1, 2, and 3. I haven't seen a press release for it just yet. Again, the show ended like 10 minutes ago, but I am to be curious to see if that's coming to all platforms, because that, I think, is the first time Metal Gear Solid 1 has been re-released across the board. That's exciting stuff. And, of course, any additional changes they can make. PSVR 2 did have some games being shown here, but I was looking at them. I don't know if there's anything that really maybe jump out of my seat and go, okay, that's why I bought the headset. I mean, Resident Evil 4 PSVR 2, I think that's going to be a fun experience. I liked Resident Evil 4 on the Quest. I think it was pretty cool. So I'm expecting it to be even better here based on what I've seen with my multiple playthroughs of Resident Evil 4 Remake. They didn't have any kind of release date or window or anything for it, just that it's in development. So I guess they wanted to remind us that it exists. Arizona Sunshine 2, it looks like a first-person zombie game. That is coming out this year. There was a first-person military shooter called Crossfire Sierra Squad. That's from Smilegate. And from what I remember, they were involved with Crossfire X. So it seems like the Crossfire name here is also for VR. I don't know if there's a game that's available on other VR headsets necessarily and it's getting ported to PSVR 2, but hey, a military shooter, hopefully it's better than Crossfire X. we had Synapse, that's coming out July 4th, so a little over a month away. And then Beat Saber, which is out right now. Awesome game, but again, it's been available on multiple different headsets by this time. There was a pretty good showing by Bungie in the sense that they showed something other than Destiny 2. It's something people have been hoping Bungie would do for a while now. Like Destiny 2, I know people really enjoy it, but I'd be curious to see what Bungie can do after Destiny 2 or even alongside of it, and it looks like they're doing that. They're going back to their roots. Marathon is getting a reboot. The only issue, once again, is they didn't really show much. They showed kind of a CG sequence and then the title, which, I mean, again, this is obviously an announcement for a game that's still kind of a ways off, and it's a way to get people excited about what's next for Bungie. But I don't know, just something a little more here for some of these first-party games. And that also carries over to Firewalk, who I was incredibly curious what they were working on because they seem like they're lining up to produce the first-person shooter live service game that Sony may need if Call of Duty ends up slowly getting away from the PlayStation platform, with Microsoft obviously looking to try to acquire Activision Blizzard. This game's called Concord. It is for PS5 and PC, again, as you'd expect for these live service titles, 2024. And that was kind of it. They just, once again, didn't really show anything. And again, it's a shame because I would have just been curious to see what the talent at Firewalk had come up with here. But I guess that's for another showcase. We did have Jim Ryan talk about some new hardware, which I think I'm going to make a separate video on that, well, whatever that thing was, the remote play device. Interesting looking accessory there. But they closed out the show with Spider-Man 2. And part of my predictions for this show is that they would close out with Spider-Man 2. I kind of hedged it. I was like, you know what, maybe they'll throw that in somewhere in the middle because Sony Santa Monica might want to show a title card. But no, in this case, Spider-Man 2 had an extended look, and the game looks great. Like I love what I'm seeing here. It appears that the start of the gameplay shows Peter, I guess, just getting the symbiote suit. So he's black. He has the black suit Spider-Man running around there, because even Miles seemed a bit confused by his look, asking about, oh, you had new threads. And you can kind of see Peter being very aggressive and confident as he goes, overconfident at times, where he got hit with a bunch of missiles, and all that plays into what you would expect Peter to act like when he has the black suit. So I still don't mind the look of it. It looks a little more rough, whereas you typically figured it would be very smooth all the way around. Not quite. So I'm liking what I'm seeing here. The big set pieces, the chase with the lizard that they're fighting, and you see Kraven, of course, going to New York. It looked like Miles was creating these web lines as he was sneaking through, so there's a bit more freedom there. But again, I was a little surprised at the end because there's no release date for it yet. At fall 2023, so they're still playing into the idea that this will be their big holiday title. They also mentioned to investors that this game is coming out this fiscal year, which actually leaves the door open for it to technically fall into 2024. I feel like Spider-Man 2 is coming out this year. It's just a little surprising they're not necessarily confident enough to put that release date, because September has been kind of floated and rumored for this game, but The fact that they weren't able to date it here makes me think it might be a month or two later, potentially in October or November, but from what we've seen with Spider-Man 2, it looks pretty good. Also, can we just stop and talk about how good Insomniac has been for Sony, especially in the first 3 years of the PlayStation 5, with the titles they've been able to produce being there immediately for the system's release, with Spider-Man Remastered, with Miles Morales, then putting out Ratchet and Clank, now seeing what Spider-Man 2, and then, oh yeah, they're also working on Wolverine, which very well could end up 2024, 2025. They have a very good release cadence over there with Insomniac, and hey, they actually showed gameplay. But going back and looking up and down the list of games that I have here, the presentation was very heavy with third-party and indie games, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because you do come across a title that kind of catches you off guard and all of a sudden you're looking forward to, like Phantom Blade Zero, but it's still not really any release dates for these games, very little bits of gameplay, and it kind of felt like Sony ran their showcase without necessarily being ready to run their showcase almost 2 years since the last one. Also, there are a few games that were not here that kind of surprised me a bit. I figured Team Asobi would have shown up in some sort of way, even if it was a PlayStation VR 2 title, just something. And then you look over Twisted Metal, no show, even though we're talking about the show that's coming up. We had the poster reveal, and oh yeah, the biggest one, Naughty Dog with their Last of Us multiplayer, their factions mode, seemed like they were on course to at least explain and talk about and maybe even show off with gameplay, but nothing. So for me, I'm sitting right around a C+ or a B- for this showcase, and I gotta be honest, the last 10 minutes with Spider-Man 2 kind of saved the entire showcase a bit for me, just based on what they showed here and what the expectation level was set to. But let me know what you guys thought about this PlayStation showcase down below. Maybe you really enjoyed it and you want to talk about some of the games you liked, or maybe you were disappointed by what you saw here after waiting, like I said, over a year and a half since their last showcase. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.